every year it's always either around election that just happened or elections that are going to happen or something big that is about to happen. And actually this year when I thought about it before, there's really not much going on right now. It might sound silly when I say that because lots of things are going on in the world, Middle East, but it's not that I can tell you that Israel today is being, or that all the entire country, bless you, that the entire country is dealing with some kind of I don't know, main agenda that everyone are dealing with it and talking about it, and or even 2 or 3 or 4 different agendas. There's not really any of that. We're in this place right now that we had the last election that in a way were very important because there was this feeling in large parts of the Israeli society, regardless of political affiliation, by the way, that it's going to be an election of change and that something's going to change in the political system. A lot of people thought that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not going to get elected. Prime Minister Netanyahu thought he's not going to be elected. Actually, up until the election day, in the morning of the election day, he still told people that he thinks that he might lose, which is quite extraordinary. That even the person himself thinks that he's going to lose, and then he has this landslide. And think about it. If he thought that this is going to be the case, think about what everybody else were thinking. All the polls showed that that there's going to be some sort of a change, that center-left might win. And then the results of the election came, and basically nothing really changed when you look at the results of the election. Because the main blocks in Israeli politics stayed more or less the same. Okay, Netanyahu won the election because he got 30 seats after all the polls predicted that he'll get between 19 and 21. All of a sudden he got 30. But it's not that he managed to, let's say, move hundreds of thousands of people from the center left to the right, but he just cannibalized his own bloc and got the votes from a lot of other right-wing or extreme right-wing parties. And when you look at the blocks, you see that actually, if there were some minor changes, the changes were that from 120 seats in the Knesset, if you compare it to the election in 2013, 1 seat moved from the right to the left, actually. But the overall picture, because of the coalition system here, the overall picture was that Netanyahu got the mandate from the president to form a coalition. He managed to form a very narrow coalition, but he did it. And so basically, in the big picture, nothing really changed. It's not that this country went more to the right or more to the left. The changes were inside the blocks. Voters moved from, from Yair Lapid to the Labour Party and to Moshe Kahlon's center party. Voters moved from Habayit HaYehudi, the extreme right, to the Likud. Voters moved from, from Likud to Shas, the ultra-Orthodox party. So it was all like this game of chairs nothing really changed in the big picture. If there's one thing that did change, and which is quite an interesting political phenomena, is the joint Arab list. And it was interesting not only because all of a sudden the third largest party in this country is the Arab Party, which is, again, it's interesting, it's important, but it was interesting because it was a phenomena that came from bottom up, at least as it came from top down. It came from top down because there was a law that raised the threshold. Okay, that, you know what the threshold is. In order for a party to be elected for the Knesset, they need to get to a certain threshold of the percentage of the voters. The threshold was, I think, around, it was 2.75, I think, or something like that, or 3%. They raised it to 3.25, which means that you need to get more votes. You need to get at least 4 seats in the Knesset in order to pass the threshold and actually get elected, which meant that the 3 different Arab parties, that each of them got between 2 to 4 seats or to 5 seats. If they ran separately, they would split the votes, and some of them wouldn't get into the Knesset. So, and ironically, this bill was passed was pushed by Avigdor Lieberman for totally racist nationalistic reasons, in order to keep at least some of the Arab parties out of the Knesset. What it did is that it united them and gave them more political power. It was really, so sometimes I say that that really the worst intentions create the best results sometimes. But so it was the top-down approach. But it would never happen only because of this bill and this top-down thing. The only way it could happen is if there was a bottom-up push from the public, from the voters, from the Arab public, that said, you know what, we had enough of those, splits, political splits between different parties that we don't necessarily really understand why they should run on their own when, we're a minority anyway. Why should we split our vote? And another thing that the Arab voters said to the Arab parties, you know what? We're not really happy with what you've been doing for many, many years. We want to be part of the political game. We don't want to be isolated. We want to be integrated. We don't necessarily want to be Zionists, but we want to be part of the Israeli society. And in order to be part of the Israeli society, you want more political power, you want more representation, and you want you guys to deal with our day-to-day problems. For the Arab minority in this country, there are much more important issues as equality, democracy, jobs, economy, housing, and many issues that regular people deal with. Okay. And without that push, this thing would never have happened. And I think that this is the most interesting phenomenon in the last election. And it's interesting because many people thought, the day after it's only in order to get to pass the threshold. Day after, they will split again to 3 different parties, and and there will be nothing new. But they didn't, and it's been a few months from the election now, and they're still together. And they're still together because they know that this is what their voters want. And there's a big struggle within the joint list on where they want to go. And because you have there, on the one hand, it's a very interesting and eclectic mix, because on the one hand you have radical Islamist polygamists, okay, anti-gay polygamists, and on the other hand you have ultra anti-religious feminists, pro-gay, and everything in the middle, okay? And you have the ultra-capitalists and communists, and really it's a mix that was, the joint list is joint around the fact that they're an Arab party, okay, and they represent the Arab minority. But ideologically, each of their 13 MKs is in a totally different place. You have their Jews, you have their Arabs, you have the Jews, you have Muslims, you have Christians. It's a very, very diverse, and even to say diverse is quite an understatement. Um, and and it will be interesting to see which one of the powers that are working inside this party will be more dominant, and there's a struggle between those who are, let's say, more isolationists, more Arab nationalists, and those who say, we are Arabs, but we want to integrate into Israeli society, and we don't want to. We don't want to act against the state, we want to be part of it. And for example, I think it's the first time that the joint list, or that an Arab party is chairing one of the Knesset committees. Really, think about it. It's quite an extraordinary thing. And by the way, the same thing happens with the ultra-Orthodox. I mean, if you have those two big minority groups in this country that for years were either sidelined or chose to isolate themselves, I think they're heading towards more and more integration into society, and this is, I think, the biggest challenge that Israel has for the next, 10, 20, 30 years. And you see that those two groups want to integrate, want to be more part of society. For example, more ultra-Orthodox join the army, and it's not because of this stupid draft bill that only antagonized people. It's because they want to be part of society. More ultra-Orthodox go to study in the university. And they do that because they know they need to get a job, and they want to provide for their families. And for the first time in this government, there's an ultra-Orthodox minister. It happened also because the court said that we can't continue with this joke that you are a minister, but your title is a deputy minister because you don't want to be part of the state. So it's and actually the ultra-Orthodox rabbis, the most ultra-Orthodox rabbis, gave it the green light a few weeks ago, and there's an ultra-Orthodox minister. It's historical in this country when you think about it, and for Israeli society, it's so important, not because there's a minister, but because it's a sign, it's a green light from rabbis that for years said, we don't want anything to do with the, let's say, the Zionist establishment. And all of a sudden, they want to have something with it. They want to be part of it. There was before the court decided that he has to be a minister, there was, when the government was sworn in, usually you have this group picture at the president's residence. And only ministers are invited. But this guy, Rabbi Litzman, called the president and asked him, listen, I know I'm not a minister, but it's really important for me to be in the picture. So if you can invite me to be in the picture, and he invited him. He was in the group picture. And again, it might sound stupid, but it's the fact that it was important enough for the guy to be in the group picture, okay, means that he wants to be he wants to be part of society. He wants to be part of the establishment. And again, all of those things are happening not because all of a sudden the rabbis or the ultra-Orthodox politicians decided to change course. No, it happens because the voters and the constituency wants more integration. I'll give you an example. You know how many when I go over my Twitter feed, you know how many ultra-Orthodox young people write to me on Twitter? Israeli ultra-Orthodox, really people who goes to pray 3 times a day, really the most ultra-Orthodox people, okay? But they talk to me on Twitter, and this is something that I never had almost any any conversation with, 18-year-old Hasidic Israeli. Never. And the fact that they're on Twitter is because they want to be part of society. They want to be part of the conversation. Okay? And on issues that have nothing to do, also on issues of religion and church and state, but on issues that have nothing to do with religious issues, on foreign policy, on how many ultra-Orthodox young people write to me on Twitter after I tweet photos of restaurants I go to, of food I eat. It might sound funny, okay, but and people ask me, oh, can you tell us what is this, or is this kosher, or can you tell us where to go? And again, it's something that I don't think existed 5 or 10 years ago, and it's hard to explain it to people that come from America, because in America it's very, very different, very different. Because it's in America, the number of ultra-Orthodox people who try to isolate themselves from society is much smaller, because it's a different kind of country, and I think that those are really, really big developments that are happening in the country, and in the long term, I think it will turn Israel to a much better place. Okay, if those two groups will be integrated into society, it will make Israel more democratic, it will make Israel less radical, and so those two things at least make me much more optimistic about the future than people might think. So that's and if you look at the politics, this is where we are. It's a very narrow coalition, 61 out of 120, which means that it's almost impossible to pass any bill or to do any major initiative. Not that it would matter I think that even if it was a 70 or 80 or 90 or 120 MK coalition, this government wouldn't do anything. One of the best things with Prime Minister Netanyahu is that he refrains from any action on any field unless he's really compelled or he has to do it. He's very passive, and it means that a lot of bad initiatives or initiatives that I think that are negative, are usually they stop at a very early stage, because it just when the Prime Minister's policy is just to maintain status quo on any field whatsoever, foreign policy, domestic policy, economics, social issues, anything. When the policy is to maintain status quo at any cost, then you know what? There's at least less damage that's being done. After this coalition was formed, it's the most. By the way, even although it's a narrow coalition, it's the most right-wing government Israel has ever had since it was formed. The most right-wing. And everyone thought, oh, this country is going to go down the drain, they're going to close down the Supreme Court, they're going to cancel democracy, they're going to annex the territories, they're going to do this, they're going to go to war, they're going to do that, they're going to bomb Iran, which obviously is not the case, and it's not going to be the case. And I really think that until now, and this is what I think is going to be until this government will finish its term, which I don't think is going to be very long from now, I don't think that this government will do anything, okay, really nothing. And the big issues, like for example, I don't know how many of you are aware, for example, the debate about the new gas explorations and the policy about the gas revenues and whether we should export it or not, or whether you should give a monopoly to this energy company or not. which is, again, this is one of the big issues today. They're not able to deliver on it, because it's just when a big issue comes, the government is unable to function, because especially because of lack of leadership and lack of political will and lack of ability to actually deliver on things and to implement government decisions and government policy. So on the big things, I'm not worried at all. I'm not worried about the government canceling democracy, which is a ridiculous claim. I'm not worried about, I'm saying that because after the elections, because people thought that there might be a change, and at the end there was no change. People thought, oh, that's the end of the country, that's it. We can close down the shop, we can all, get our, German passports and move out of Israel. But this is ridiculous. And there's no, I don't feel any sense of urgency about Israeli democracy going down the drain, or it's ridiculous. Which doesn't mean that there are no problems, because the fact that the government is unable to function, or that it's maintaining status quo at any cost, means that a lot of problems are not really being handled. And again, I'm not talking yet, we'll get to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a few minutes, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a lot of issues, internal issues, social economic issues. For example, the thing that in 2011 caused 500,000 people to go to the streets in Tel Aviv and demonstrate for social justice, the cost of housing, or the cost of living. There's, it's almost 5 years now, okay? There's really no change whatsoever, and it's the same prime minister. And there's no change because the prime minister's policy is actually not to change. He thinks that the economy is in the right course, so he doesn't really think that there should be, again, a fundamental change. The changes are small here, there. Because of political considerations and the coalition considerations, he needed to give the finance ministry to Moshe Kahlon, who is he says about himself that he's a reformist, not really. And you see that on, the big social economic issues, there's a lot of talk and very little action. Because again, the policy, and in Israel, even though it's a parliamentary system, the prime minister has powers almost as the president of the United States, even though it's a totally different system. And it's because the vast majority of ministers are just incompetent, and the ministries are unable to function. So everything at the end comes to the prime minister's table. And usually he has the power, if he wants to, he has the power to basically decide on everything, almost everything, if he wants to. But the problem is that many times he just doesn't want to decide. And as I said, another problem is, again, Israeli-Palestinian conflict that is still, even though it was sidelined by the Iranian nuclear talks and then the Iranian nuclear deal, and things that are happening around us, Syrian civil war, and the refugee crisis, and many issues, it is still here. Okay, it's not going to go anywhere, and it's in a complete stalemate. I don't know if you noticed. And when it's a stalemate, I don't mean that it's not going anywhere. When there's a stalemate, it's going backwards. There's a deterioration. There's an escalation, as you see in the last days in Jerusalem, and the last months in Jerusalem, and and at the end, something will happen. Usually, when there's an escalation here, it ends with, I don't know, another war in Gaza, or another intifada, or effects it has on Israel from the international community. I don't know, again, a crisis in the UN, boycotts, whatever. And this is an issue that, again, the government right now, at least from what I see, has no intention to try and create some kind of a fundamental change of policy, or to try to take initiative in order to try, even if not solve it, because I don't think that the issue is solvable in the next few years, not only because of Israel, but because of the huge mess that the Palestinians have among themselves. But at least to try to improve the situation. On that issue too, the policy is let's maintain the status quo and hope for the best. One very interesting development on foreign policy is that the main issue that was driving Prime Minister Netanyahu's career for 20 years is, let's say, not off the table and not completely dead, but it's diminished, okay, which is the Iranian nuclear issue. That after the nuclear deal, obviously it is harder for the next, again, if the deal will be implemented, it will be harder for the next 10 to 15 years to say that Israel is under an existential threat of an Iranian nuclear bomb, okay? This talking point will not go away, but it will be put on the shelf and come back in 10 years. Which means, by the way, that there's this window now of this void of foreign policy agenda, because it will be obviously Netanyahu will still deal with Iran, because Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism and it's delivering weapons to Hamas and to Hezbollah and it's doing a lot of nasty stuff and bad things, but it's not a nuclear bomb. Okay, it's much harder to tell people, listen, they're making a nuclear bomb, and to get them to listen, then they support terrorism. Okay, it's nothing new. Everybody knows that Iran supports terrorism, and it's, again, it's less of a threat than they're making a nuclear bomb and they drop it on Tel Aviv and annihilate it. So something will have to come into this and to fill this void of foreign policy agenda. And for now, it's not very clear what it's going to be. And usually, and I don't think this void will be filled by an issue or an initiative by the Israeli government, which means that somebody from the outside will fill the void and the Israeli government will be drawn into it, and not of its own initiative or its own will. I think this is where we are, more or less. It's, as I told you, it's very different from previous briefings I had with the Dorot Fellows, because really there's this, at least that's what I feel, and I actually had this conversation with my chief editor yesterday, that there's really it's hard to say what's going on right now, because there's really nothing going on. It's like we're walking in this, very, I don't know the term in English, Mayaf sign, how do you say it in English? Like those, like the shell.
Walking on eggshells.
No. Like this shallow water in this, the small ponds after the rain that, after a few days start to be all messy with mud, and then, you just walk there. So it's like, this is where we are. We're just walking those small ponds, not going anywhere, and just,
So Barak, how about this? I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to start with one question from me, and then I'm already taking a list. picking up on one thing you said and one thing you didn't even mention. I think you said you foresee that this government has a short life. So if there's nothing going on, why is that? And you absolutely did not mention the Zionist left opposition. Like the Labour Party wasn't.
Who?
Who exactly? Just checking.
Oh.
And I'm taking a list.
First, again, I think when I say this government is not gonna be a long-term government, I meant that I don't see them finishing a term of 4.5 years. I just don't see that. The previous government wasn't even 2 years, okay, and it was. And it's not the current coalition. I don't think it is more stable than the previous one. And usually coalitions in this country are not being, it's not that they're being toppled from the outside. They usually disintegrate from within, okay? Because usually MKs, you got elected. Why would you fire yourself after a year and a half? But usually it happens by the initiative of the prime minister. This is what happened in the previous election, when he decides that he needs to things aren't going anywhere. Again, I do not see how this coalition might become or who's going to join in. Maybe Lieberman with his party will join in, but I just don't see what difference it's going to make. I don't see a shift in policy that will bring the Labour Party in, even though, and we'll talk about the Labour Party in a second. I don't see that. And with the 61 MK coalition, there's not a lot you can do. It's not clear yet whether the budget at the end of the year will pass in December. Even if it passes, there's a certain point in time that people say, you know what, we had it, and actually there's some time when I go to or speak to politicians or go to the Knesset, you already feel that, and we're just, this government is 4 or 5 months in, you already feel that people had it. So again, not that it means that in the next election there will be some big change, okay, but I just feel that there is, I don't see those people pulling through together for 3-4 years. I don't see that. I don't know, maybe they'll manage to do another year and a half. Then it will fall apart, I think. It's just, again, I don't see what's the glue that will keep them together, and I just don't think that political survival will be enough, because there are different interests, and the domestic politics are one thing, but you have all sorts of factors that come into the picture, external events that might happen. We have this thing in this country of having a war every year or two. This usually leads to an election. So I don't see, again, I don't see this coalition finishing its term or even getting close to finishing its term. The opposition, it's, I don't think that there's a real opposition in this country right now. Part of the thing was that before the election, people saw the polls. I think that the polls did show that people wanted a sort of change in this country. It didn't materialize because at the end of the day, Netanyahu managed to get a lot of people. Again, what he did is that he didn't move votes from the left to the right. He did two things. He cannibalized his own camp, and he managed to get Likud voters that thought of staying at home and not going to vote because they had it with him, okay? And I'm talking about huge numbers. In major cities, places like Ashdod, like Ashkelon, like Be'er Sheva, people that thought, it's hundreds of thousands of people, that thought of staying at home, said, you know what, we're not going to vote for the Labour Party because we hate them, okay? But, you know, why should we give Bibi another 4 years? You know, we don't think so. And he managed in the last few days before the election to get those people out of their houses by, you know, lying to, selling them lies like, you know, the Arabs are coming in droves to the, you know, to the polling stations, and, you know, and Tzipi Livni and Bougie Herzog are going to bring ISIS to Jerusalem, and all sorts of bullshit. And on the other hand, you know, the Labour Party or the Zionist Union, whatever they want to call themselves, didn't manage to counterattack and to expose his lies, and to convince people that either they should stay home or they should vote for them. Because what the Labour Party did in the election wasn't a small thing, because what they did, their strategy was to first get their voters out. They calculated that they need something like 815,000 votes in order to get 27 or 28 seats and win the election. Okay, with the voter turnout of previous election. Okay, they thought that the turnout will be more or less the same, or even less, which is better for them. They managed to get from their 815,000 voter potential, they brought something like 795,000. Okay, that's actually almost everybody. So they maximized their base. The only problem was that the turnout was higher. So the number of voters that was enough, according to their calculations, to get 28 was only enough to get 24. And they tried to win the election through, you know, political calculations, instead of trying to win the election with actually bringing people to vote for you. Okay, people who didn't vote for you in previous election to vote for you this time. And large parts of the Israeli society, they just decide, okay, we're not going to ask them to vote for us. We're just hoping that they'll stay home and not go to vote. And this was a mistake, because I'm not saying that they would have been successful, but they didn't even try. And and this head-to-head battle that was very clear before the election, and the polls and everything, this atmosphere was created because there was no real natural leader, okay, on the center left. There was only Mr. Herzog, which is a nice guy and I love him, but he was a fictional candidate, okay, and he is, until even today, he's still a fictional candidate, because he's unelectable. He's electable in a very narrow part of the Israeli society, 25% of the Israeli society, but in the other 75%, I don't see them electing him. Why? You know, a lot of people will tell you because he's rich, because he's Ashkenazi, because he's a lefty, because he's from the elites, because he's and it's all, I guess, true in a way, but it's not only that. It's just that because he does not, him and his party and this whole establishment is not really trying to speak to the entire Israeli society. Not to the Arabs, not to religious people, not to ultra-Orthodox, not to people from the periphery, not to people who are Mizrahi, okay? And it's a problem. For example, when he had when Herzog had had to make a decision who he wants to put as his potential Minister of Defense, he had two candidates. One of them was Amos Yadlin, the former head of military intelligence, who's the son of a former Minister of Education from the Labour Party from 40 years ago. Okay, establishment, Labour Party, elites, Ashkenazi, you name it, like the classic. And on the other hand, he had Shaul Mofaz, okay, who's an ex-IDF chief of staff, Mizrahi, from poor family that built his way up. And he chose Yadlin and not Mofaz. So I'm not saying that this is why he lost the election. I'm just saying that it's it's a sort of an example of why it's like, in a way, what has happened to the Labour Party or to the Israeli left is what's happening to the Republican Party in the US, but the other way around. Okay? Society is changing. Minorities, or let's say weaker groups in society want to be part of the political game, want to have more political power, more political influence, and the party that used to be, that the demographics in the country put it as the leading party for years and years and years, all of a sudden society changed and the party did not adapt or couldn't adapt or didn't want to. It's exactly the same as in the US, but the other way around. Thank you guys, I had a lot of fun.